it's 11th Jan 2023, right? So let's give a bucket with this name. I'm choosing the region which is near to me. ACLs are disabled. Block all public access, I'll enable it. I'm just going to make it public. This bucket and the objects for now. And other things I'll leave it as it is, okay? Now there are few things which we are going to cover today. One is versioning. Another thing is encryption, right? So when we talk about versioning, currently versioning is disabled by default and encryption is by default it is S3 managed by your S3 service. Okay, you click on create. Bucket name must not contain the uppercase. Okay, I think I created it with the uppercase. So this should be fine now. So I'll create a bucket, right? So once we have created a bucket, what we are going to look into today is the properties of this bucket, like the main features of this S3 bucket. So the first feature is bucket versioning. Versioning is something like you version your documents. So it is to track each and every change, whatever you are doing to your document, right? So for example, like I created a copy of the document and then like for example, here what I'll do is I have an object. I'll upload an image. For example, I added one document over here, right? Now next time I will upload the same document, right? So next time I will say, okay, like upload and I upload the same document. What is going to happen? It will override this, right? If I do some changes, I will lose the previous copy of the document, right? So basically, like I'll open up that doc and what I'll do is like I'll open up this doc and here I will do some change. Okay, test. I did this change and I'm saving it. So what am I going to do now? So when I'll upload this file, okay, so what will happen? My previous version would be overridden by this new version, right? So now currently I have lost the previous copy. Right now I cannot see what it was before. I cannot revert back to the previous version, right? And what I do if by chance I go and I click on delete, what will happen? This document will be permanently deleted, right? It is showing me like basically it is asking for the confirmation like you permanently want to delete the object. I say yes, delete it, and then this copy is gone. There is no way I can recover it, right? So first thing, so like when we are talking about versioning, so one thing why we are doing it is basically we want to recover our documents. Like you are versioning your documents, so if anything like recover your documents, basically like original copies, previous versions, or basically the deleted one, right? Deleted ones, right? So if you by a chance like you delete it and it is permanent change, you won't be able to recover your documents, right? So basically what do? We can enable versioning. So the first thing it is very simple. You can go and you can say properties and you can say edit and you can enable your versioning, right? So now here we are talking about, so versioning can be in 3 states, okay? So either it is enabled, okay, either it is disabled, or either it is suspended, okay? So the life cycle goes like this. So first it is disabled, okay? First it is disabled, okay? So the first when you create a document it would be disabled, right? So when you create a bucket it would be disabled, then you enable it, okay? Then it goes to the enabled state. Once it has gone to the enabled state, now you cannot disable it, okay? So what you can do is you can just suspend it. Does this make sense? So it is like a life cycle, okay? So the bucket versioning, you can move it from disabled to enabled and enabled to suspended, right? By default it is disabled. You enable it, it would be storing the copies, okay? It would be storing all the versions, right? It would be creating versions on top of one another, and then basically if you delete it, if you suspend it, then how does it work now? So when I enable the versioning, I'll click on save changes. So once it is enabled, what is going to happen? The same thing we are going to perform. So in this bucket, I'm going to upload some objects, right? So if I upload a file, I will say add file, and basically I'm uploading this file, right? I'll upload it. Now, if I go and I do a change to this document, I'll just open this up and here I'll remove this test. Okay, so this is a newer version, right? So what I'll do is I'll upload the fresh copy of it. Okay. So I'm uploading a new document and I'll click on upload. So what will happen now? You can see the latest document over here, but it shows you show versions. You can click on show versions and it will show you all the previous versions of the document. So if you open up this document, it will basically, like if I click on this, it will show me, okay, I'm using the object URL. I think I did not granted the public access for now, right? I have not added any policy or I have not enabled the, so I'll just click on like open like this with my access keys. Okay. Now if I open it up, this one doesn't have test, right? This is a newer version. And if I look at the previous version, it would be the one which has test in it, right? So I'll click on this buckets and objects, right? And here I can do show versions. So it is showing me all the previous versions. So if I want to revert to back to a previous version, how can I do that? If I want this version to be the active version, how can I do that? I can again I need to upload a fresh copy of this version. Either you delete this one, but then you will lose this copy, right? So what do? You again upload this copy, right? You can use a copy command and you can, using this version ID, you can upload it back. So once you upload it back, that will become your current version, right? Then the question comes, like here you can see the version ID which is attached, right? Every version will have a version ID, right? So as you will basically, what is the use of this version ID? So I can go to the Postman. Okay, so if I want to get a particular version of the doc, I just need to specify the version ID as part of the query parameter and it will fetch me that particular version. Copy this object URL. I'll go over here. I'll copy this object URL. But what I need to do is, before I make a hit like this, I have to go and update the properties of this bucket, right? Policies of this bucket. I have to make it public so that I can access it. Otherwise, I should provide the access key, secret key along with when I'm making a request, which I don't want to do right now. So here I'll edit the policy and I'll attach the one which is having the access, right? So I'll add a new statement, basically S3 service. And here I'll say all actions for now. Okay. Add a resource. And so I want all the permissions on all the objects, right? I'll be able to get all and all this. And who all should be allowed? All the principals, right? Currently, I'm just providing this permission. I'll of course change it once I'm done with this tutorial, right? So once I have provided this, I'll go over here and I'll make a request. So I'm making a get request to this particular object. This URL is copied. I'll make a get request and version ID has been attached. So when I send it, it will give me that version of the document. So this is about it, right? So bucket versioning. Now comes the third thing. Okay, we have seen like it was disabled. We enabled it. Third thing what we can do is we can suspend it. So I'll click on it and I'll suspend it. I don't want versioning anymore. Okay. So like I just wanted like a version. Earlier we were maintaining tracks of the versions and all, but now it is like we don't need the older versions and all. So I'm just suspending it. So once you suspend it, right? If I go back to my objects, you will still see, like currently you see only this, but you can still see the previous versions, okay, for this doc. So what versions have been created, they will remain intact. They will remain as is, okay. So, but now if you'll upload any doc, right? Now suppose I go to pictures and I upload this image. So what is going to happen? Once I upload this image would be created with a version null, right? That means it won't have a version ID corresponding to it. Okay. So if I click on show versions, you can see the version ID for it is null, right? Again, if you enable it, what if now I enable the versioning again? Its version ID would still remain null. Okay. So what is the difference between having version ID null and having a proper version ID? That means these documents are versioned. Okay, you can do a get on this, providing this version ID in your query parameters, right? So for example, when I'm making a request, I can provide my version ID over here, right? And it will fetch me the document with this particular version ID. If I have to fetch this document, it is not version controlled, right? So if I make a request to company.png, I don't have to specify the version ID along with it, right? So this is one major difference. Now if I go and if I again enable this versioning, what will happen? Again, like for the for now, whatever documents I will save, it will have the versioning on, okay, for those. But which are previously lying, they will remain as is. For example, like if you see company.png, its version would still be null only, okay. But now if I upload a fresh document like company.png again, the newer one will have another version ID, right? So if I'll upload it, you would be able to see that this newer version of the document will have the version ID associated with it, right? I will quickly upload one more file to show you like what is it like when you delete a file without a version and what is when you delete a file with version. Okay, so I'll go to like downloads for now, and I'll just upload this document over here. Okay, now when I'm uploading this document, so here I'll just say show versions. Okay, so okay, this is still there because I have not disabled my versioning. So here I'll go and I'll say edit and I'll say disabled. Okay, suspend. So once I suspend this, now I'm going to edit. Okay, this is suspended. Now I'll upload a file. Okay, which is like a fresh file. Okay, something like this file. Okay, I'll just upload it. Okay, I'll click on upload. So this file got uploaded. Since it was suspended, now I'll not see a version for it. Its version would be null, right? Now what will happen if I delete this object? If I try to delete this object, what will it do? Basically, it will delete this object. So once you make a request, if I have perms, I have provided all the perms. So it will delete this object, right? I say delete this, it will delete it. If I specify a version ID, if I say delete this particular object, okay. So I'll make a delete request and I'll say delete this particular company.png, okay, with this version ID. So I'll select this object URL and I'll paste it over here. Okay, now since versioning has been disabled, it is not giving me it as a part of the URL, right? So I'll go back. Okay, company.png, I'll say show versions. So I want to delete this particular version, right? So I'll specify explicitly which version I want to delete. Okay, so I'll say like version ID is this one. So what will happen if I make a send? It will delete this particular version, right? It got deleted, right? So if I'll refresh it, I'll not be able to see this version, right? Similarly for the null, if you'll say company.png, it will delete it, right? There is another thing, okay? If I enable the versioning back, okay, so if I'll go and I'll say edit, and currently it was suspended, but if I enable this versioning back, okay, save changes. So once I have enabled this versioning, what is going to happen? Now if I try to delete the objects, okay, so I'll go to the objects and you have something like versioning is enabled now, right? See, versioning is enabled. What will happen? You are trying to, if you try to delete an object, what it will do? It will create a new version for delete marker, okay, which will say like this object is deleted. You understand? Then second thing is if you add a new copy, as in if you add a new document with the same key, right, it will create a new version for it, right? Third thing is, so delete an object and you are creating a new document, right? So these are the two things, right? So you're deleting an object and you are creating a new document with the same key. So these are the two things, right? So if your versioning is enabled, these two things are happening, right? Then what happens like if I suspend the versioning? Okay, let's talk about another thing, like if I suspend the versioning. So once you suspend the versioning, so what is going to happen? Delete the object. Okay, if you delete the object with version null, what will happen? Deleted, right? To delete object with particular version, specify the version ID along with in the query params, right? Now here when your versioning is enabled, right, and you try, now there is one more thing, okay, delete the object selecting with versioning on, okay, with versioning on, versioning is enabled, but here you have done something like show versions, okay. So when you say show versions, okay, and then you select a particular document, that means you are selecting a particular version, okay. Delete the object selecting a particular version, okay. So what is going to happen if you are trying to delete the object selecting a particular version? It would be like permanent delete you want to do, right? And it will not, okay, and it will not add a delete marker, okay. But if you delete an object without selecting a version, okay, then it will add a delete marker. Let me show you this thing. So let's emphasize on these 2 points, okay. So if I'm trying to, if you see over here, like show versions is done, right? And if I select this one, right, and I say like delete it, okay. So let's see. So what is it saying? It says, do you want to delete it permanently, like delete it? I will say yes, okay. I'll say delete permanently. It is giving me like, do you want to permanently delete it? I said yes, and I click on close. Now if you say like show versions, right, you don't see any delete marker or on. That object has been deleted, right? But if I do this show versions, I just don't select any particular version and I select this complete.png now. And if I say delete, what is it asking? It is saying, do you want to delete it? I say delete. Yes. So once I'll do that, it is basically going to add a delete marker to it. Okay. Have I removed this versioning? Is it? It is enabled only, right? So I'll go to my buckets and I'll say test1 and I'll say show versions. So here you can see company.png and delete marker has been added for it, right? So it was not a permanent delete, right? Yes, so delete the object, selecting a particular version, it would be a permanent delete, will not add a delete marker. But delete an object without selecting a version, then it will add a delete marker, right? This was about like how this versioning enabled and disabled will work. So this was about your versioning, right? This is how versioning works. Okay, so why do we need versioning? Basically to create versions of your docs, to track your changes, right? Now there is one more thing, okay? So in a way, it is adding a layer of protection, right? So what is happening? Like for example, if you have versioning enabled and you are deleting a doc, it is not going and deleting it immediately, right? What it does, it adds a delete marker, right? Until unless you are selecting a particular version to delete it, right? So what is happening? Versioning is adding a layer of security to your docs, right? Like for example, it is preventing your docs from being deleted, right? Preventing docs from being lost, from being lost or deleted, isn't it? So it is basically adding a delete marker, right? Adding a delete marker to the documents which you are deleting them. And once a delete marker has been added, you can still restore it. For example, like now I need this document, right? It just added a delete marker. What I have to do? I have to select this delete marker and I have to delete the delete marker. Delete marker doesn't have any information, right? It is just like you have deleted it, it is telling you, right? So if you delete that delete marker, it would again become available. So if I have deleted it, now if I go back and if I look at the objects, what is going to happen? This is again visible now, right? This is now the active. If I disable show version, still I can see that document, right? So this is now the active doc, right? Active version, right? So you can always restore back, okay? Adding a delete marker and can be restored by deleting the delete marker, right? This is how it works, right? But what if I select a particular version and I click on delete? It will delete it still, isn't it? So now we add another layer of security which should prevent that as well. Okay, so for that cases we use MFA delete. Okay, so for those cases we will use MFA delete, right? So MFA delete is basically like it will prevent, like what it will do. So if you are trying to delete a particular version, okay, it will ask for MFA token, right? Okay, or if you are trying to suspend the versioning, right? Still it will ask you for the MFA token, and it can only be done by the root user, right? Does this make sense? So here what is going to happen? Now I'll go to the properties and I will click on edit. Currently MFA factor has been disabled. You can see you cannot activate it from here. You have to use your console. Okay. So I'll go to the CMD and now I'll do like AWS configure, right, to configure it. Then there is a command to activate your MFA delete. Okay. I'll just pick up that. So like here it is AWS S3 put versioning. Okay. I'll copy this command and I'll just modify it to be for my purpose. Okay, so here what you have to do is, so I have to give MFA is my device token ID, okay, and the new token, okay. Like first let me change the bucket name. So bucket versioning, so it is like put bucket versioning is the command. So minus minus bucket, and what is your bucket name? So bucket name is test 11 Jan 2023. I want to enable it for this particular bucket, right? Versioning configuration status is enabled. MFA delete. So when you are enabling your MFA delete, okay, so to enable your MFA delete, okay, what should be on? Versioning has to be on, okay. So because it is working, it is preventing like a particular version to be deleted, right? And suspend the versioning, you need MFA token, right? So versioning is must, okay. So versioning must be enabled, okay. Then only you can work with this MFA delete, okay. Otherwise, your documents are not at all protected, right? If versioning is not enabled. So here what is going to happen? I'm using this bucket versioning configuration enabled MFA. Okay, the ARN of my device, okay, which I have configured in AWS. Okay, you can read about how to configure the device using MFA token. And here I have to specify the token which is generated through my authenticator app. So I'll just enter that, and this should enable my MFA delete. Okay, so this has already been added to the document, this command. I'll go to the properties and now we should be able to see that MFA delete has been enabled, right? So once it is enabled, I can go to the objects and I can say show versions. Now if I try to delete a particular version, earlier it was simply deleting it, right? Now, but if I'll try to delete it now, it is saying like you cannot delete it because MFA delete has been enabled for this bucket. And to delete it, you should use a CLI, and there you have to provide it is like a second layer of security, right? So you have to provide the authenticator, like the code, and then only you would be able to delete that particular object, right? So hence MFA delete adds to a layer of security for you being able to lose your document, right? So this MFA token is generated by the root user and only he would have the privileges to delete it. So this was about MFA delete, right? Then coming to the next topic, which is encryption. Let me just quickly go over the talk in case we have missed upon something. So versioning allows you to preserve, retrieve and restore every version of every object. Once you enable the versioning, it will preserve existing objects anytime. Okay, you do any operation. Get request will by default retrieve the most current version. But if you want a particular version, you can specify version ID as part of the query parameter, right? For bucket can be in any of the three states: unversioned, versioning enabled, or versioning suspended. Why do we use it? Basically, version of docs track changes roll back to previous version. Accidental deletes turn on, and once on cannot be removed, suspended. These are the topics which we have already covered. Then MFA delete versioning must be enabled. Bucket owner must include two forms of authentication. MFA delete requires changing the versioning and permanently deleting the object. You can enable or disable the MFA. If versioning is suspended, a delete request can only remove an object whose version ID is null. Now moving on to encryption. Okay. So here we have this encryption thing. We have covered every point in this. This replication will cover it a little later. We are moving on to the next topic, which is encryption. You have an S3 bucket, right? So here is your S3 bucket and here is your client. Okay, so this is your client. Now this client is sending you the data. It is uploading the documents to your S3 bucket, right? So what is happening? It is sending the document to the S3 bucket, right? And this document would be saved over here. This file would be saved over here. So when the document is being sent to the S3 bucket or while it is retrieving the object back from the S3 bucket, so this is called like how secure it is. Okay. So first of all, like this data should be secure when it is going from the client to the S3 and moving back from the S3 to the client. Another thing is when this is the bucket and the data is lying in the bucket, that data should also be secure. It should not happen like anyone who breaks into your system be able to read the content of the data, right? So that is why there are two types of security. One is for the data in transit, okay, while it is moving inside or outside of the S3 bucket, and another one is for the data stored on S3. Okay, so which is lying there on S3, that is data at rest. Okay, so for these two things we have to have, like we need to have security, right? So when the data is moving in and from the S3 and also when the data is lying on the S3 bucket. So how do we secure the data in transit? So there are two ways of doing it. Okay. So basically what you can do is there is one preferred way, like whenever you are making a request to and from S3, you have to use HTTPS, okay, which will add a layer of security, SSL protection. So all your data would be kind of secure, right? It would be a secure network on which your data would be going, right? Another thing is whenever the data is stored on S3, you should use encryption. Okay, so here comes the concept. So S3 like provides you various kinds of encryptions. We have server side, we have client side encryption. So server side encryption means when you are actually going to send the data to the S3 bucket. Okay, so what will happen? Encryption will happen here before it is stored on the S3. Okay, so what is server side encryption? So server side encryption will happen here. Encryption. It is going to take place over here. Okay, before the object is getting stored on S3 bucket. Okay, so before the object is stored, here your encryption will happen. After the object is encrypted, it would be stored. Similarly, when the client is making a request, it will pick up this object, it will decrypt it, and then it will send it back. Okay, so what is happening? All your encryption. Okay, so when the data is being saved, before encryption is happening on the server side, Okay, before the data is saved, right? So it is getting encrypted over here, right? The data is encrypted, and before it is retrieved back, the data is decrypted and given to you. Okay, so this is about like how your server side encryption works. So here the data is not encrypted. You are just moving it over the HTTPS layer, right? On the other hand, what would be your client side encryption? It would be like client has encrypted the data. Okay, so client has encrypted the data, and now the data is moving to the server, and the data would be received by the client in the encrypted format, and decryption will happen over here. So client side encryption meaning encrypt and decrypt will happen over here, right? Encrypt or decrypt of data will happen over here. Okay, server side means it will happen before it is getting stored on your data servers. Encryption and decryption will happen. Client side means encryption and decryption will happen on the client side, right? So in general, what are the various types of encryptions? Okay, now here we talked about like you have a server side encryption, and then you have your client side encryption, right? So here you have your client side encryption, right? So server side encryption, it is of like three ways you can do it. Okay, so one is SSE S3. Okay, another one is SSE KMS. Okay, and another one is SSE C. Okay, and then you have client side encryption. So what is SSE S3? What is SSE KMS, and what is SSE C? Okay, this we are going to look into, and then what is client side encryption? Client side encryption is very easy and straightforward. So what is going to happen? Client has his own encryption and decryption mechanism. You are not concerned about it, right? So what is going to happen? Like here, for example, you have an S3 bucket, right? So what is happening? And here is your client. So what is happening? Client will actually take the responsibility of managing your keys, okay, which are used to encrypt your data. So we know like encryption is generally of two types, like we have a symmetric key and asymmetric key encryption. Symmetric key is basically we are using the same key to encrypt and decrypt the data, and asymmetric is we have like a concept of public private key. Public key is used to encrypt the data and it is public, right? And private key, which is used to decrypt the data, is given to only the ones who owns that, right? So basically who needs it, right? So here we have a client side encryption. So client side encryption means the client will take the responsibility of managing those symmetric keys or asymmetric keys. They will manage everything, like they would have the responsibility to encrypt or decrypt the data. Only what is going to happen, like they would be sending the data which is encrypted. The data would be stored on S3, and they would be retrieving the data which is encrypted only, and here only decryption will happen, right? So client would have the responsibility of managing your keys, okay, managing your keys, okay, encrypting and decrypting the data. Okay, so client would be responsible for managing keys, encrypting and decrypting the data, right? So this is your client side encryption, right? So only the data is just your encrypted data reaches S3 and is stored here. Okay. So this is about your client side encryption. Then we talk about server side encryption. Server side encryption, as we talked about, so all your encryption and decryption will happen at the server side. Okay, so let's look into this SSE S3, SSE KMS and SSE C now. Right, so this client side encryption is very crystal clear. Okay, so what are the benefits of it? Basically, this not more about the benefit, it is about like client not trusting AWS with the encryption or decryption, okay, or with the keys, right? And also like sometimes like this is also more secure because like here the data, even when it is traveling, right, it is secure, isn't it? It is encrypted. In transit also it is encrypted, right? So here, like it is encrypted and then moving over the network, right? The encrypted data is moving over the network, right? So these are some of the advantages of using client-side encryption, okay? So they may use their own keys to encrypt and decrypt and everything, right? Then coming to something which is like SSE S3. Okay, we'll study about this server-side encryption one by one now. So what is going to happen in SSE S3? You have an S3 bucket, right? So this is your S3 bucket and here is your client, right? So this is your client. So what is happening? They are sending the data to your S3 bucket using HTTPS, right? So once the data will reach over here, what will happen? S3 will have your data key, okay? It will have your master key, and what is it going to do? So basically data key, you know what is a data key and what is a master key. So think about like your data is coming over here, okay? So what it does, it uses a data key to encrypt your data, right? So what it will do, encrypt the data using the data key, and then this encrypted data key, right? Yes, encrypt the data using the data key, and this data key is also encrypted using the master key, okay, right? And this encrypted data key, encrypted master key, and the encrypted data is going to lie on the S3 bucket only, right? So when the data will come over here, it will encrypt the data using the data key, and this data key is actually encrypted using the master key also, so that no one can steal your data key, okay? If they want to do it, they need the master key, right? So this will, it is like a, what do we say, envelope encryption, right? So envelope encryption is like when you are encrypting the data, and with the key which you are encrypting the data, that key is also encrypted, okay? So this is happening over here, right? So it will have your data key, it will have your master key, and your encrypted data. Data is encrypted and stored here along with the master key, right? Yes. So this is happening over here. And then when the client will make a request for the data, this data would be going back after decryption will happen. Okay. So this data would be decrypted and then returned back, right? So here what will happen before it fetches the data, it will decrypt the data. How will it decrypt the data? It will use the master key to decrypt your data key, right? And then using that decrypted data key, it will decrypt your data and then it will return back it to the client, right? So this is how your SSE S3 works. Okay, so your master key, data key, everything is lying there on your S3 bucket, right? Now it doesn't mean that everything is going to lie on the single, availability zone or something like that, right? So it may be distributed. They may not be lying together. So it may be distributed on the servers to enable more security, maybe on different shelves or maybe across the availability zone. So that is something which we don't know, right? So this would be as per the logic, right? So this is about how SSES3 works. Then coming to the next point, that is your SSE KMS. Okay, we'll compare their performance and all. So just let's understand the process. Okay, so here it is SSE KMS. So how it works in SSE KMS? SSE KMS is something like, you again, like if I draw your S3 bucket over here, right? So this is your S3 bucket, and there it is using another service, which is your KMS service, which is your key management service, right? So here is your KMS service. Okay. and here it is your S3 service. Okay, and then here you will have your client. Okay, this is your client. So what is happening now? So client is sending the data to your S3 bucket, right? Yes, it is sending the data to your S3 bucket. What will happen? So S3 will ask KMS, okay, it will ask KMS for your master key. Okay, your master key is now stored on your KMS. Okay, master key stored on KMS. So it will ask KMS for the master key, right? And then it will also take the data key. Okay, so what will happen? Like KMS, instead of returning, it is stored on KMS. Okay, so KMS, what it will do? It will give your S3. KMS will give back your S3. Okay, S3 will ask for KMS for the keys. So KMS will give them the data key and the encrypted data key. Okay, so once it will get back the data key and the encrypted data key as in KMS has the master key, right? So it will give one encrypted data key copy also, right? So what is going to happen then? So once it has got the data key and encrypted data key, S3 will actually encrypt the data, right? Using this data key, right? And then it will discard of this data key. So then it will store with it the encrypted data and the encrypted data key. And the encrypted data key will be lying over here, right? So then what will happen? So it is lying over here, right? Then what will happen? When the client will make a request for the data, right, back. So what it will do? Now the client is asking for the data, right? It is looking out for a particular data. So what S3 will do is, it has to decrypt now the data, right? So what it will do? Now to decrypt the data, it needs this key to be decrypted, right? Encrypted data key to be decrypted. So what it will do? It will send the encrypted data key to the KMS. KMS will decrypt the data key, right? So what it will do? It will go and it will send the KMS with the, it will send the encrypted data key, and KMS will return back the decrypted data key. Once it will get the decrypted data key, it will decrypt the data. Okay, and then it will return it back. Does this make sense? So decrypted data. Okay, so what is happening over here? So there are few things which we need to know. So first point, what is happening is, so like when the client is requesting for the data, S3 makes a request to KMS for the data key. Okay, for the data key. So KMS returns back both the data key and the encrypted data key. Once it will get it, what will happen? S3 will use the data key to encrypt the data, and data as in your object, and will store and will discard this data key, will store the encrypted data and the encrypted data key. Okay, once it will have it, right? Then when it is asking back for the request, right? So what will happen now? It is asking back for the request. So what is it going to do? When it is asking back for the request, what will do? S3 will send encrypted data key to the KMS. KMS will decrypt it and send to S3. S3 will decrypt the data using that key and return back the decrypted data. But here what is happening? We are using one key management system, okay, which is responsible for now managing your data keys and your master keys, right? Encryption and decryption happening over there, right? So what is happening? It is managing your keys over here, right? And also, so what is happening in KMS? Okay, KMS also provides you the ability. So one thing is like here in KMS, we'll read about two things now. So one thing is like KMS has AWS managed keys. Okay. Or you can upload your own key also, like customer managed keys. Okay. So either you can tell KMS to use its own key which is managed by AWS, or you can provide your own key. Okay, if you're providing your own key, what is going to happen? You can manage the life cycle, like as in the rotation, you can edit it, you can delete it, whatever you want to do with your own key, right? So you can actually rotate it also, right? AWS managed key, they are by default like rotated every year once, okay? And they are free, but customer managed key, it will cost you like $1 around monthly, right? So these are slight differences, okay? So this we talked about how it works in the case of your SSE KMS, right? Then we have the last one, which is your SSE C, right? So then we have SSE C. SSE C as in, like what is going to happen now? SSE as in server side encryption. So encryption is going to happen on the server side only, not on the client side. Okay. So here is your client. Okay. So what is happening? This is your S3 bucket. So it is sending the data. The data is encrypted and decrypted on the server only, right? So here the data is encrypted or decrypted. So what is the difference? The difference is in SSE, the key is customer provided. Okay. So what will happen? Like here you are sending, the customer will also send the key along with the request. Okay. In the header. Okay. It is sending the key along with the data. Okay. So it is sending you the key and the data. So what will your S3 do? What will your this S3 do? It will encrypt the data using this key and store it over here. And it will discard of the key, right? Key won't be stored over here. Only the data is stored. Okay. Data is stored and key is discarded. It will not store it. Okay. Right. So, and the next time when the actual, now when next time it wants to decrypt the data, okay, it is asking for back the data, it will actually again decrypt the data and it will return it back, right? So if the customer wants to, manage the keys, it doesn't want to store it on AWS, then SSE also comes into the picture, right? But the data which is going is not encrypted, okay? So like encryption and decryption is taken care by your S3 only, okay? But the keys are provided by your SSE, by your client, right? Since the keys are moving as part of the header, so what do? We prefer using HTTPS in this case, okay? Because you are passing on the key, which is important, right? Which is a sensitive information as part of your requests, right? So every time you are sending your data or receiving your data, it would be basically you have to pass on the key. In case of SSE S3, keys are getting rotated once every month. MS you can have permissions also, okay? Like you can say, okay, this user should be able to use this key for encrypting or decrypting, okay? Like this master key should be accessible to whom, this data key should be accessible to whom. Okay, you can also get the audits like for like who has access to your key. in the past, or who has, who has used your key in the past, right? So all those audits can be done, right? So customer provided key, like when you are actually customer managed key, you are doing it, it would be giving you more control. You can rotate it as per your wish. Okay, so you can also grant cross account access to your S3 objects. Okay, and you can configure the policy for S3 managed key to allow access to the account, right? Then moving on to the next thing, that is your client managed keys. This we have already discussed, client side encryption. Now another thing comes, this I have taken up from S3, from your AWS side. So what they are talking about is, like for example, like by default what S3 is doing now is, whenever you upload an object, encryption has become mandatory. It was not mandatory earlier, so you could store unencrypted data, but now by default, whenever you save the object to the S3, it would be by default encrypted. Okay, using SSE S3, okay, policy. And if you want, like, okay, all the objects in my bucket should be KMS encrypted, right? So you can attach a policy. So it is for AES 256, meaning it is for S3. You are enforcing, like, it should be AES 256 S3 encrypted, right? And here you are just forcing it, like, it should be encrypted irrespective of whatever type, right? You don't worry about like what type it is encrypted, using KMS, using S3, or what. And now this is already done by default. Okay, so you don't have to add this policy. So then using KMS, you have to specify, like, okay, like instead of AES 256, you have to specify AWS KMS, right? So this was all about this thing. Coming on to key hierarchy. See, basically, when we talked about like key envelope, right? So when we talked about envelope, like this envelope encryption, what is happening? You have a data key with which it is encrypting your data. So what is happening? Like here you have your data, for example, right? This is your data. It is encrypting it using your data key, and this data key is also getting encrypted using your master key, right? And then your data key and your data is lying there protected, right? And your master key can also lie somewhere, right? So all the three keys are lying there. Now what is happening in the case of key hierarchy? Like you want it to be more secure, right? So what do you do? What do they generally do? Like in the case of database, like if you want like all your rows, your primary keys to be, like encrypted, and then you also want your tables to be encrypted, table data to be encrypted. So it is like adding more layers to it. So what is happening? Like here, this data is encrypted using one key. This key is again encrypted using another key. This key is again encrypted using another key. This key is again encrypted using another key. Okay, and then you have your final key through which all the layers will start decrypting, right? This will decrypt this, then this will decrypt this, then this will decrypt this. So this is your key hierarchy, right? Then coming to another topic, and that would be the last topic for the day, that is your object lock. Okay, I think I've covered everything about this which needs to be known for now. Encryption, I think we have covered a lot. Then moving on to the last topic, that is your object lock. So what we have studied till now is, like we talked about, like let's recap. So first thing we studied about was versioning. Versioning, we said it will help you prevent your data loss. How? Because it will add a delete marker. It will do a soft delete instead of going and deleting your objects, right? But there are chances, like even if your versioning is on, you specify I want to delete this particular version, it will do a permanent delete. So for that you can enable your MFA delete. MFA delete, what it will do, it will basically ask you for a MFA code to be able to do that, right? So it's like a second layer of protection, right? But object lock is like, basically we are talking about something like a worm model. Worm as in write once and read many times. Okay, so you are writing an object once and you can read it many times. Okay, so that means you cannot update or you cannot delete the object copy. Okay, that is what it means by object lock, right? So what is going to happen? Like for example, I have an S3 bucket. Okay, so I have an S3 bucket. Here I'm storing one object, right? Once I store this object, suppose the version is 1. Now object lock always works. It always has to have versioning on. If you do not have versioning on, you cannot use object lock. Okay, so versioning is mandatory. You have to enable versioning to be able to use your object lock, right? So it follows the worm model. So what is going to happen? Suppose I have this version 1, okay? I'm storing this object over here, right? So once I have added this object, I can specify the retention for this object. Okay, this is write one, write once, read many times. So as you will basically, like you cannot delete a copy of it. There is a something which is called a retention policy. So retention policy as in which specifies like how long do you want to retain it and what should be the mode for your retention. Okay, so there are two modes of your retention. One is your governance governance and another one is your compliance. Okay, so if you look at this governance, you can specify like like you specify the time period. Okay, like when you specify governance or compliance, you can specify the time period, okay, for which you want this object to lie there. Okay, for which you want, for the time period you want to retain this object. Okay, so like if I say like, okay, I want this object to be retained for like a time period for this object, time period for retaining this object, you cannot delete this object before that, right? So basically time period for retaining this object. Now here I have specified, like for example, like I have specified like 2 days. Okay, so now if now I have specified like this object, it should acquire an object lock for it for 2 days. Okay, and what policy I can specify, what mode, like either governance or compliance. Now what is governance and what is compliance? So governance says like you can, if you have this governance mode, right? So what will happen if you have this governance mode, that means you can acquire, you can, like you have specified like 2 days I want to retain this object, but if you want to delete it, right, if you want to delete it, you, if you have perms, right, if you have perms, you can delete it, you understand? So it requires a perm, okay, which is for like which is for overriding this ignoring this governance mode. You have a policy, okay, so which will like bypass this governance mode, okay, and you can still delete your object. You need a policy for it, you need a permission for it. Okay, so if you want to override it or you want to delete it, you can still do it, okay, using the governance mode. But compliance mode is more strict. So what is compliance mode going to do? If you are trying to delete an object, you cannot, even a root user cannot do that. Even a root user cannot do that. Okay, cannot do that. Okay, so that means even with the admin privileges, you won't be able to delete the object, okay, which has compliance mode on it. Okay, so it is very strict, right? So object lock is like you are holding a lock on the object which says you cannot do any changes to the object, you cannot delete the object. But here in the governance mode, like first of all, you are enabling the versioning. So if you are actually like it is a different thing, right? So if you have enabled the version and you specify, okay, this particular version I want to, delete it, you can still do it in the governance mode. You can create users and all. You can provide them permissions. Okay, these many users should be able to delete it. Okay, what can be the retention period and all this. In the compliance, even the root users won't be able to do it. So once you acquire an object lock in the compliance mode and you say like for 2 days I want the data to be preserved, no one would be able to delete that. Okay, until unless you delete the AWS account and then you create it back again. Okay, and there is another thing which is called your, so this is about your retention policy, and there is one more thing which is called legal hold. Okay, now you can understand what is a legal hold. Legal hold is basically like you are, if you say you acquire a legal hold on a particular object, that means like you don't specify the time period over here. Okay, so what you do, there is a something like put legal hold, okay, permission which you have. Okay, so through which if you have this permission, you can you can acquire a legal hold on the object. Okay, so if you have acquired a legal hold, no one can, update it or delete it and all this. Okay, so the person who has this put legal hold can also remove this, legal hold. So once he will remove this legal hold, then this object can be deleted. Is this making sense? So there is no retention period or retention mode. It is different from the legal hold. And on a object, you can even have a retention policy, and you can also specify a legal hold. It is up to you, right? So this is about your retention modes. Okay. So then here we have some theory and some like whatever we explained, it is just walking us through. So governance mode, it talks about so it talks about the three things. Amazon S3, it needs versioning. It does not support enabling object lock after a bucket has been created. So you have to, when you are creating the bucket, that time only you need to create the object lock. It is working on the worm model. Okay. You have two ways, retention period and legal hold. Retention period, you have to specify the fixed time. And during this period, your object is protected and cannot be overridden or deleted. Legal hold is something like here you don't specify like no expiration date. Okay, you need this put a legal hold policy. Okay, and then once you remove it, it can be done, right? So in the governance mode, like I talked about, like this is the policy. If it is a governance mode, you need this S3 bypass governance retention policy to be able to bypass it. And once you bypass it, you would be able to delete it, right? But in the compliance mode, once you have acquired a compliance for 2 days, you won't be able to do it. Okay, even if with the root user privileges. Okay, so it cannot be changed. And this was about your legal hold. So that is all for today's lecture. I think I'm done. Thank you. There is one thing, like, so today in the topic we covered bucket versioning, default encryption, and object lock. So object lock, right? So we can do hands-on on this a little bit. So here, this we have already seen default encryption. So you can click on this default encryption. By default it is SSE S3. You can switch to KMS. Okay, in this KMS, you have the privilege to basically there are AWS managed keys. If you say AWS managed key, you can select AWS S3, which is by default a AWS managed key. Okay, or you can provide your own key ARN. Okay, so that means you can create your own KMS key. Okay, customer managed key says like if I click create a KMS key, I can create my own key, like create a symmetric key or a symmetric key. A symmetric key, generally we don't use it. Generally we use it when we are not using encryption, decryption using AWS. So basically what is happening when the clients are doing encryption and decryption, right? So then we may use it. Okay, so encrypt and decrypt, then you can specify your alias. Like I can specify my test as the alias, right? Any name I can give to the key, and I'll click on next. And then who all should be able to, now in the KMS it has the privilege, like you can specify who all be able to access this key, or who all be able to use this key, right? Additional permission, so who all can administer this key. Okay, so who all be able to administer it, manage it. Okay, and then basically you have permissions who all should be able to use this KMS key. Like for example, your S3 bucket, if you want to use it, it should have this role, right? And then basically once it is done, it will ask you to review this. So like you can create your own KMS key also. This would be customer managed key. I've created two keys over here. So once these keys are created, they are not free, but AWS managed key is free of cost, like which is AWS S3 if you use, right? So that is free of cost. Customer managed key, when you will create it, you have to pay for it. Okay, so that is it. I think this is about your encryption. Then we have the concept of bucket key. This thing we have not covered. So bucket key is something like we have seen like S3 making a request to KMS, right? So what is happening over here? Server side encryption using KMS, right? So this one. So what is happening? Like for the S3 bucket is asking KMS to basically for the master key and for the to get the data key and all, right? So what is happening, like it is making a call to KMS every time whenever you have to encrypt or decrypt your object, right? So it is increasing your calls to KMS. So whenever you are paying for the KMS, you have to pay if it is your customer managed key, right? Custom key you have created, right? So you have to pay $1 per month for it. Also, like as many calls you are making to the KMS, you are paying for it. Also, like if so many requests are going on to the KMS, it may throttle, right? It may cause an extra load on KMS. So that is why lot of API calls. So you're paying per API call, and traffic, it is actually it is going to slow down the process. It makes a call to the KMS. KMS will return the keys, then it will encrypt or decrypt, and everything will go on, right? So for every encryption or decryption, it has to make a call to the KMS, right? So for for increasing the performance, what they do, it asks the KMS for a bucket key, which is applicable for a bucket level. Okay, so if the data is stored on this bucket, it will get the bucket key. Now using this bucket key, S3 can encrypt the objects using the object key. You understand? So for every object key as in the key value pair. Value is your object and key is your name of your object. So using the object key, it can encrypt the data. So one call for the KMS for getting the bucket key, and then it can encrypt all the objects for a specified duration. Okay, so it expires after some time. So basically for that duration, it can encrypt all the objects, and then basically the calls to your KMS is reduced. Okay, so here this is the concept. So here it is talking about, like if you enable the bucket key, it encrypts new object in this bucket. The bucket key reduces the encryption cost by lowering the calls to the KMS. So it will actually improve your performance, right? Then, right? So you can, when you are using KMS, you can select your bucket key as the property. Now, even when you are using bucket key, there are other things. Like for example, if you are using a bucket key, what will happen? Like you can specify, like first of all, like if I am making a request to the bucket and you are also making a request to the bucket, so different IAM users, it will create different bucket key. It will not use the same bucket key. The other thing is, like if two different services are making a call to the two different, like even EC2 instance, right? But two different instances are making a request to your KMS S3 bucket for encryption and decryption. It will use different keys. Okay, it won't be the same, right? So it is pretty secure. Okay, you don't have to worry about that. Then the other thing is your object lock, which we discussed about. So like here, so here it is like to enable the bucket lock. So that we talked about. So first of all, like this object lock has to be enabled at the time of creating the bucket. Okay, so I'll just create a bucket real quick, test. And we don't have to use uppercases. I am in the habit of writing everything in uppercase. 1 second. Huh? So here I'll just, when I'm creating the bucket, for this object lock versioning should be on. You cannot disable it. If I say disable, right, and I try to, like enable it, like object lock, if I say enable, right, so it will permanently allow this bucket to be locked. I'll say allow, I'll create a bucket. Okay, so now bucket has been created. I think so. 1 minute. Huh? Test this one. Let's look at the properties. So bucket versioning, you cannot change it. It has been enabled by default. Okay, so you cannot suspend it. Okay, for this object lock, if you look at the object lock here, your object lock has been enabled, but we can specify the retention period. Okay, so like we have governance and compliance. Governance, you will be like, you need to have that bypass governance mode policy. So if you have specified like I want to retain the objects for 2 days, okay, and you have this governance, I'll click on save changes. So once you have done that, you go to the objects, you upload a particular object over here. Like I'm uploading a file over here. It will be taking up the, like if I click on upload, okay, close. Now what I can do is, now this company.png got uploaded, right? So I can like I'll first go to the permissions of this bucket, and I will enable like I'll enable public access for now for all. so that you have to, generally in AWS we do it by the least privileges, but it is just for the demo and I'm going to delete everything after I'm done with this. So I'm just doing it for the sake of being fast, because this tutorial is anyhow going to be very long. So I'll add a new statement here. I'll select S3 service, add all actions for now, add a resource, and here I'll say resource type is your bucket, and I can actually copy it over here. I'll copy this bucket ARN and I'll specify it over here. So all the objects in this bucket and principal be your all the users. I'm attaching this policy so that it is public now, so you can perform any operation on it. So here I have this company object which I created. What am I going to do is I will select this object URL and I'll say I'll say get this object. Now what I'll do is, once I've done this get object, right? Once you have enabled your object lock and you have specified the retention period and all, I click on send. So in the headers, if you will see, right, you can see the policy over here. Like you can see the object lock mode, that is your governance. Okay. And like whatever it is. Okay. So you can also see the duration for it, like how much time it is, like retention or type, like how much time it is for, right? All these things you can check. Retain until date, so how much time, so it would be retained for 2 days, like it would be expiring on 12th, right? So all these things you can see. You need to have permissions to be able to see this information. So once you are able to see this, now if I try to, so it is a governance mode, right? So I am a root user, I try to delete it, right? So what is it saying? Like it has acquired an object lock. Do you really want to delete it? Since versioning is on, right? So what it will do, basically it will just add a delete marker for now, right? So I'll say delete object, it has been deleted. But what I'll do, I'll say show versions. I'll stick to, like, I really want to delete this, right? I want to delete both of them. So I'll say delete. So then it will say you need this policy permission. If you have it, you will be able to delete it. I do have it because I am a root user, right? So I'll click on permanently delete. I think I've added an extra space. So I'll say delete objects and the objects got deleted, right? Now another thing, like if I upload this and I say like I'm adding a file company.jpg, and when I'm adding it, I go to the permissions, sorry, not permissions, I go to the properties. Okay. And here what I'll do is, now I'll select the compliance mode. Okay. So here I'll say like object lock. Okay. So basically, so here, if I'm uploading an object, either I have to use the CLI to specify this compliance mode, or I can go to the bucket and I can change the compliance mode. Okay. So sorry, object lock mode, retention mode. Okay. So I'll click on edit, and here I will say, like, I'll change it to compliance, and I'll reduce the, duration, because otherwise I won't be able to delete it for that much time. So I'll say like deletion be 5 minutes. Okay. I'll just set it to minutes. Okay. I cannot set it to day. I have to set it to day. I'll set it as 1 day. Okay. I'll save it. So once it is saved, I'll go back to my properties. I'll upload an object now. I'll upload an object. I'll say company.jpg. Once I've selected, okay, I'll click on upload. Now once it is uploaded, I'll go to this company.jpg. I'll make a request to this to see the permissions it has. So the mode it is on. So you can see it is still on the compliance. Now it is on the compliance mode. So if it is on the compliance mode, I want to delete this object. I'll go and I'll say I want to delete this object. So it will say like, okay, you can delete it. It will just add a delete marker, versioning is on. But I know I don't want to just delete it. I want to delete it permanently. Okay. So here I will select both of them and I'll say delete, right? So what is going to happen? It is telling me something. I'll say, okay, yeah, I want to do permanent delete. But we know what we have done is we have set it as compliance. So it shouldn't allow. So when I do it, So it is saying access denied. You won't be able to do it, right? Then the third thing which we talked about was your legal hold. So for a particular object, I can acquire a legal hold. So if I enable this, right? So what is going to happen? I should have this put legal hold policy. If I have it, I will be able to put it, and then I can go and disable it later. Okay, so if you have acquired a legal hold, you won't be able to update or delete it until then, until the legal hold has been removed. That is all I think for today. We'll see you in the next lecture. Guys, please do like and subscribe. Thank you.